Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. I'm Andeea, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissman, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. This episode is sponsored by VIVARAYS, the only eyewear company that truly understands your biology. VIVARAYS are advanced blue light glasses designed with circadian biology in mind. Unlike typical blue blockers, they filter light in harmony with your body's natural rhythms, helping you sleep deeper, feel more energized, and protect your long-term health. We love companies that support biology-backed wellness, and VIVARAYS is leading the way. Use code QUANTUMHEALTHY at VIVARAYS.com to save 15% and support your sleep, focus, and natural energy the way nature intended. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. Today, I'm very honored to welcome my friend Skeeter to this podcast. Now, he is a very longtime friend of mine, and he hosts a podcast on YouTube called Catch It, A New Perception. And he hosts sweat lodges, and he's very active in his local community, volunteers, hosts workshops, seminars. He's an amazing public speaker, and he is also a life coach. And in my opinion, he is a spiritual leader and mentor. Now, I had to actually calculate this. I've known you for over 27 years. That's over half of my life. And you knew me in my darkest days, and I never even knew why until I knew. But I'm going to let you share your story today. And we didn't see each other for a very long time, and then the universe connected us again. And so I've done sweats that you have hosted and guided and led, and it's been an amazing spirit experience for both myself and my husband. And I've been sharing your podcast with so many people, and I wanted to get you on here today so you can share your brilliance with our audience, because I want people to know you and be able to just glean anything that they may need from you. The way you speak about the topics that some we're going to touch on today is just, I don't know, the downloads you get. I don't know where they're coming from, but they're amazing, and you're very guided, very talented. And yeah, so today we're just going to talk about that. And I love that your podcasts are so short, and they're like one topic, and they're very easy for anyone to comprehend. And like everybody has 15 minutes. So first, I think we need to start with your story. So how did you get to be where you are today?
It's been a really interesting journey getting to where I am. And I don't think that there was an event, and I don't think it's a certain time or space. It's been a really long journey and sometimes really difficult. And especially when I was younger, you talk about your darker days. And my first thought was, it's nice to see you in the light, Andeea, because I know what that's like personally too for myself. And I've had some pretty dark days, and I've had, whether it was in my active addiction and even after I stepped away from that and started to live different and begin a journey in recovery, I still ran into myself a lot. I was still not always doing the right thing. And sometimes I didn't know why, and I didn't know what it was about. And what I realized on a given day like today, upon awakening, I asked the universe to guide my thoughts, my words, and my actions. And I asked that I be of service to everyone I meet. And that doesn't mean to be of service in my mind, it means to be of service in their mind. So I need to be present with people when I'm around them, whether it's someone at the gas station, whether it's someone working somewhere, whether it's the dental hygienist. I mean, just to be of service to people. And I, you know, start off my day with stretching and I sit quietly. And for those listeners that are not prejudiced, that is yoga and meditation. And I know that people get prejudiced against words, and those are words that people are prejudiced against. And the reason I know that is because I was prejudiced against those words. I would hear somebody say, yoga and meditation, and I'm like, oh, yeah, good for you. Good for you. And as I begin to do them and they become a daily practice for me, I realize that I'm stretching and I'm sitting quiet. And those words people aren't prejudiced about. If I tell someone I sit quiet, they're like, oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, you stretch every morning. That's really healthy. And so sometimes I use different terminology just to be able, there's a certain group of people that could really easily accept the idea of transcendental meditation. I learned from a man that learned from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And so when he taught me, I felt like I got exactly what I needed at what time I needed in my life. And it wasn't when I first stepped into recovery. I've had mentors in my life and I've had these elders in my life that have brought me into different circles. And it's allowed me to be able to see things differently. And even to the point of whether I'm having a conversation with you two or whether I'm talking to a group of people or an individual, I should be able to learn something from you at any given moment. And that's the essence of how I get through the day today. Where I started out was as dark as anyone could fathom if they suffered from alcoholism or drug addiction, to the point where at times I would rather not feel and do whatever I could to escape from feeling at all. And so I didn't think that it was possible to have a world outside of that. And what happened is I ran into people like you. I ran into other people that were able to inspire me. And that little bit of inspiration, that little bit of hope led to the next thing, to the next thing. And it's always just a step up, a trajectory higher for me. I don't know if that opens this up a little bit in the direction that you're at, the question that you asked.
Yeah, no, this is great. So many of our listeners will have not heard your podcast before, and
Right.
that, but I do want to, because I think it'll be fun for us to just get some background on a few things. So one of the things I want to share before we get to into some of the topics that I'd love for you to share more about is just sharing your history with Native American culture, because you're the words you use, that like everything's like influenced by that. And my best friend since third grade is Native American, so I've and we grew up very closely with a Native American family, so like I'm really familiar with it, and I don't think everyone is. And so I would just love for you to share your history with that, and just because you bring it into your podcast
So,
so much.
yes, and I talk about it in a rather general way and sometimes rather vague. One thing I found about being able to get more immersed into the ways of the Lakota Dakota people is they use terminology that makes sense to me. Okay, when they use the term creator. And my ate, my uncle Al, I've done sweats with for quite some time. He's the one that helped me do Vision Quest when I first was doing Vision Quest, and he took me out to Sundance, and I was doing a lot of things with him when he was a little younger. Now he's in his 90s and things have changed a little bit. But and so what I learned is that when they use the term creator, that makes sense to me. Or he uses the term the mystery. And I like do a double take the first time I hear that, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And even to the point where I'm at the fire with him one time, and we're getting ready to do a sweat lodge, and we're standing at the fire. Before we go in, I said to him, I said, "You refer to this great spirit as the mystery," and he just kind of stands there stoic. And I said, it's not as much of a mystery as it used to be. And he smiles and says, "Yeah, I know." And I hesitated for a moment and I'm looking at him and I said, on the other hand, it's more of a mystery than it's ever been. And his whole body starts to shake and he's laughing and he says, "Yeah, I know." And that's the essence of what I believe in the energy of the universe, is that it's such a mystery, I'll never understand it. And so getting immersed into this culture, it's about being able to find certain terminology. A friend of mine, a lifelong friend of mine, have had passed just a couple weeks ago was his funeral, and I was able to make it down to his funeral, and I helped him when he needed to change his life after not talking to him for a long time, and I helped him get into a place so that he could implement the 12 steps into his life in a long-term 9-month treatment center, which this guy truly needed. And anyway, I was talking to some of his siblings, and I was saying to one of them, I said, I'm really glad that he got to take his long journey. And when he gets to take his long journey, his parents are already there. They got to take their long journey before he did. And I'm really happy for him. And she's in tears. And I said, I'm just saying it in a language I understand. She said, no, you're saying it in a language I understand. And I think that's the essence of one of the things that I like about being able to walk in traditional tribal ways is that it's just a worldly terminology. It's not specific. It's bigger than that. It's global or universal. And that's the type of terminology I need. And so when somebody passes on and we talk about them taking that long journey or they return back home through the South Gate, it might mean something specific to me, but on the other hand, I think it's bigger than that. And then someone can interpret it the way they want. So when we welcome people into Sweat Lodge, I try to tell them, you come into Sweat Lodge with us and and then you go sweat with somebody else and they do it differently than we do. They're right the way they do it because they learned from their elders that came before them and it's according to their vision. They didn't have my vision. So they're going to do it differently. And they're right. And I love that idea that you're right. No matter how you see it, what you're doing, it's right for you right now. So, I mean, all of that type of thing really gets into my subconscious and changes my terminology by being able to live tribal. And the sweats that I conduct are intertribal. That means that all are welcome. It's not just for Dakota, Lakota. It's not just for the Anishinaabe or whoever might. We are all descendants of tribal people. Everyone that I have met up to this point in my life has been the descendant of tribal people at some point in their life. So all are welcome to a tribal way of life. And that's what I'm talking about being like a bigger. And I think that that's the way that I want to continue to expand my terminology, my way of thinking, and how I change my subconscious is by using universal or global language that makes sense no matter what your background is, whether you have a spiritual background, whether you have a spiritual path you walk or not, it should be open and not exclusive. It should be all inclusive, if that makes sense a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you have a name that you use
On my podcast.
on your
Or yes, I do.
podcast, and we wanted you to give a little story behind that name,
So
how that what came about.
my name is Ketuk, and it's Gaelic, and it's a spirit name. So originally, when I first heard the name, I knew it was my name. What I was hearing, and it's interesting because I just did an episode on my podcast of what we hear may be different than what someone said. Okay.
And we're gonna get to
Very,
that.
very accurate, right? And to the essence of this, even, what I heard was catch it. That's what I was hearing people say, catch it. And they were saying ketuk. They're like a different accent on it almost. And so what the word means is of the woods, is what ketuk means. Well, then when I named my podcast Catch It, A New Perception, it was a pun off of what I thought my name was. And it's time for a new perception. Like every moment of my life, it's time for a new perception. And I like the idea. So originally I wasn't putting my name on it. I wasn't putting my face on it. I thought I'll use a spirit name. I'll keep myself out of it because I don't want it to be about my ego. I don't want to get in the way of something, so I don't want to make it about me. I just want to be able to help people. So I'll just use the spirit name and do it this way. And things have evolved into what they are. And I think through the process, I'm able to step back enough where I don't believe that my ego is crushing it or making it something that it shouldn't be by being able to put my face on it, or I even put my name on it in print because I've had friends after doing a couple seasons, I had friends say, "Well, I can't find your podcast." Because they couldn't find the name, and the name is so specific. Now, I believe if you Google Catch It, a new perception, nothing else will come up.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that, there's no way to find it almost. So
Right.
it's very specific, which is kind of cool. And on the other hand, once I attach my name to it in Word, then somebody can just Google my name and eventually they will find it when they find Skeeter Scanlon out there somewhere. It's among the things. So yeah, I like the idea and I've continued to use that spirit name because it's part of the essence and the authenticity of what I started with and what I'd like to hold on to in the podcast.
Okay. So let's go there for a second where you were just talking about sometimes what we hear, like the other person meant a completely different thing, but because of our ex life experience or what have you, we hear something different. And in your podcast, you actually shared a story of when your dad had shared some news with you. And so
Yes.
yeah, I would love for you to give people that example because it was a huge eye opener for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Excuse me. It was interesting because I'm 19 years old. I'm drinking in a bar, and at the time, drinking age was 18, 19 years old in the states where I lived. And my dad came to my bar to pick me up. Now, my dad drank most every day of my life. It's just who he was. And he came to my bar and he had some drinks with me, which was unusual, but nice to see dad. I'd usually have to go where he drank to have conversation with him.
Wow.
And so we sat there for a few hours, and then he gives me a ride home. Because of the way I drank, I did not have a driver's license, I didn't have a car. I drank every day. And so him giving me a ride home was just part of the process of me getting where I need to be. And all of a sudden, as we were getting to my place, he broke the news to me that he had cancer. And it kind of came out of nowhere. Now, at this point in my life, everyone that I knew that had cancer, my great grandmother, my grandfather, some other people, they had died from cancer. Everyone that I knew. So, what I heard my father tell me is he was going to die. And it's interesting. I'm 19 years old. He's pretty young. He's 39 years old at the time. And I left his vehicle believing he was going to die soon. He never said that he was going to. He never implied he was going to. But when I heard he had cancer, that's the only thing I could think of. And looking back on it, that's when I realized, years later that he never said that. He never implied it. Nothing. So often in my life, I hear somebody say something, and because of what my experiences have been up to this point or my relationship with them, when they say this is what I hear. And it's not necessarily what they say, and it's not what they imply. Now, my father lived for decades. He just passed about 11 or 12 years ago, and he ended up passing from cancer. But it's interesting and he had some very serious, because they checked his lymph nodes, and you're talking 1980s, that would have been a very serious surgery. But it wasn't the cancer itself that was serious. It was the surgery to find out if there was more. And so it's interesting how that had such an impact on my life, realizing that something that I thought was that the type of impact that had because I heard that a man that I loved with all my heart was going to die. And I'm 19 years old. And the impact I have as I move through time, realizing he never said it, never implied it. So, what is it that I hear from you that you never said? How often have I done this in my life? And I know that being present with people matters, listening to what they say, taking it in the context of who they are and how they say it. I mean, there's a lot of life skills I can learn about listening and going through being through treatment a half dozen times, being in a state hospital by the time I was 13 years old, court ordered, I have learned a little bit about listening. And even though I've learned a little bit about listening, it doesn't mean I'm always been tentative just because I've been taught certain skills. I have to take it to the next level or take it to a deeper level to actually hear the essence of what you're talking about, or maybe even ask a question. How do you mean that? What did you mean when you said that?
Yeah.
Because I could take it wrong in every fashion, especially when my head starts to spin. If I'm, whatever that might be, I could spiral down and take it to a different direction that you never meant. So, yeah, I have a lot to learn about this. And I think the more I'm open to learning about it, the more I'm going to actually hear what you say.
Yeah, well, it makes me think like when we don't ask questions and we just assume, so that's us making an assumption in
Correct.
our mind. So you assumed your dad was dying, even though he was just giving you news that he had cancer. And, we end up going through life making decisions based on assumptions that aren't true.
Correct.
And so yeah, this is really critical. This is a really critical learning here for us to be present, to listen, to ask questions, because also sometimes people are in a certain state of just whatever state they're in. He might have been in fight or flight, so all that. I mean, he didn't even tell you until the ride home. He had hours to tell you in the bar, but he didn't.
Right.
He needed to work up the courage to tell you, and so all that came out was I have cancer and no context.
Correct.
Oh, but don't worry because the doctor said XYZ. None of that came out. That
Well,
was
and
helpful for
and
you.
the interesting thing is, it may have, but I didn't hear it if it did come
Yeah,
out.
and you didn't hear it.
And that is what I realize is he could have given me all of the information, and possibly as soon as he said, I have cancer, no matter what he said after that, it's a word I have attempted to correct at least 3 times on this podcast because I have used the word but, and then I stop and I say, and then I go forward. I try to remove that because as soon as I use that word but, I'm erasing everything.
I
Just like
know.
what happened that day. He said I have cancer. I can't hear anything after that. Well, he gave me all of the information.
Yeah.
And as a 19-year-old kid, I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Possible. I don't know. I mean, and that's the other thing too. I often tell people there's at least 3 sides to every story. Okay, that day there was my father's side and the way he gave me that information, my side and the way that I heard it, and then somewhere in between is the truth. And the way when I'm mentoring people, often in the way I tell them, there's your side, there's her side, and somewhere in between there's the truth. Because we filter information differently.
hmm Yes, absolutely. I remember listening to it was when your podcast first came out. You told me about it, and
Right.
I don't think it was the first episode. I want to say it was a couple episodes in. And that was supposed to be the first episode I heard, by the way.
Right.
It was supposed to be that way. And I heard you were sharing about swearing and
Yes.
why we feel a need to swear. And I, at the time, had a much worse, like I have a potty mouth. And it really made me think, like, yeah, why do I feel a need to say the F word or whatever to get a point across? Is it because I don't have confidence that what I'm saying is just what I'm going to say and it's good enough? That was just huge. And there's crossover here with quantum biology because when we say certain words or terminology, whatever we're talking about here, we're imprinting on our body water, and we know this we have proof of this through Dr. Emoto's work and Veda Austin's work that it is doing something. Like our words really do matter.
Right.
I have a coach right now who's, okay, I almost said a word I'm not supposed to say. Not helping me, assisting, guiding me, leading me. He's
Yes.
leading me to be more mindful of when I say kinda or I guess. or I don't know. All of those have uncertainty, basically anxiety, fear, and doubt is underneath those. Would you say with the word but,
Yes.
like you said it erases, but when it like what is the underlying emotion or feeling that like in your
Correct. And sometimes I think it can be different. And with that one word, what I'm learning is that I correct it as I say it. Right in the middle of it, I'm going to just stop, pause. I did it on an episode of the podcast recently when I'm recording, and all of a sudden, as I use that word, I stop and I just replace it with the word and go forward. I think that what you're talking about, the terminology we use is so huge because what are we telling ourselves through that terminology, whether it's, the curse language? I mean, I had a filthy, filthy mouth. And if I said something that offended people, I would use it as often or more often. I didn't really see how that could offend you or why it mattered if it did. And I get it. I was in a much different place at that time in my life. The reality is, I realize that when I'm around the sacred fire, getting ready to do ceremony, and we have people up on the hill right now doing vision quests, and I did a sweat lodge this morning, and I'll do one tomorrow, and we're going to take care of the things that we need to take care of in all ways that are sacred. And we stand before this fire. Why would we be dropping an F-bomb to explain something? Why would we be talking down to someone or down about someone negatively in any fact? Any of that stuff needs to dissipate. And if I'm not going to do it around the sacred fire, then why would I do it anywhere else in my life? Why would I? And for me, it's about being able to be conscious of, you know, see women, and I don't know that either of you caught this episode. I've talked in my different episodes about it, how women are stronger and smarter than men. And it's interesting because I was listening to the one with Morley, I believe his name is, and he was speaking about some of the same types of things. And I use some of the same examples. Nevertheless, it's interesting because if we don't realize that we need to honor the women in front of us, and I think that we're losing something. Well, it's how we talk to women that we honor them. It's how that's the respect. That's a really huge thing. Well, if I'm going to speak or use certain terminology, I may do it in front of women a little differently, and the language is not going to be any different. Otherwise, I'm disrespecting myself in front of men. You see what I'm saying? It's like I might tweak it a little bit because women, and this is the way that I was taught, this is some of the terminology I was handed. Women are our mothers, they're our wives, they're our daughters, they're our aunties, they're our nieces, and they are to be honored and respected as such. And if they're not ours, they're someone's, so therefore they are ours. And just that whole essence of that, and talking about women being smarter and stronger. One of the examples I use on the podcast, probably more than once, is how women are stronger than men. And it's really simple. They're strong enough to give birth. That's one way right there. No man I have ever met has been able to give birth. And not that all women will give birth, or I'm not saying that. They're capable of it as a whole, that alone, because and the idea of one reason that I give for an example on how they're smarter than we are is because they go with their heart before their head. And men try to force themselves into a situation or through things. And so when we learn from women on how to navigate something, it's because they learned from their heart often. But those are examples that I like to use because to me it makes sense. And so if I'm going to use different terminology around women, I should probably do that with men. If I want to truly respect men, why would I be cursing around them if I'm not going to curse in front of a woman or in front of a sacred fire? So, and one of them, it's interesting. I heard a woman it's an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, so all people are welcome there, not just alcoholics. And I heard this elder walk up behind someone. and she was at the podium, and she said, she said to this person, I love your knowledge of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love your knowledge of the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love your passion for Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's a book on the podium called Alcoholics Anonymous. And she taps this book and she says, but there's not one cuss word in this book. Like, nice shot, Margaret. And it just really gets the point across that you're trying to say, oh, you're professing that you really have a lot of affinity for what's in the book, and you're going to tell everybody about it. And if you're using curse language, it's ineffective with someone like her. And so it's like it really gets bigger every time I hear people talk about why they use certain terminology or don't use certain terminology.
Mm.
Yeah,
I just, oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Laura.
Oh, just back to, I did hear one of the episodes on women, and I loved how you looked at a woman's strength, and it wasn't just so much her physical strength, it was her inner strength, and that you admired, and what you see as a strong woman, it's that inner strength. And I really enjoyed that and learned from that. But something that my dad always told us that makes me think of what you're trying to bring out here today about how men should maybe view
Yeah.
women, and I think we have lost, is that in olden times when when men wore hats, if they walked along the street, they would tip I think that's being forgotten, that they would tip their hat to the pain of childbirth, kind of to acknowledge the pain of childbirth that women did suffer.
Right.
And yeah.
And it's interesting because that inner strength that you speak of, I think is really easy to see in women. It's like, and part of it is, I mean, I talk to people sometimes about the suffragettes, which was only 100 years ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Mm.
And the strength of some of these people and the things that they did. And it wasn't a physical strength at all. And I think that so many women don't realize who the suffragettes were, what they did, and how they stood up. And it was just an inner strength. There was no physical strength to it. And they accomplished so much in such a good way. And yeah, I think sometimes they need to stand up in a different way and it looks different. That's the strength of a woman. Let it look different. In my eyes, that's a, it's how it's kind of like I don't know if you've ever heard me on the podcast talk about when I talk about someone who's beautiful. And often what people don't realize is they'll look at you and see you as physically beautiful and not realize that they're seeing something internal that comes out physically.
Mm.
It's like, oh, wow, she's nice looking. And it's like, oh, wow. Like you really, and I mean, and I think where we see it more is like when we fall in love with someone, how they become so attractive. And they were attractive originally, but really, and they're so physically attractive and they become sexually attractive and they're just like so attractive. And it's like, well, we're in love with them. Of course, they're always going to be that. And then on the other hand, we see someone who's physically attractive and we get to know them and it's like, not so cute, not not really so cute, because there's something inside of them that I don't know that it needs to change, but some essence that just is not off. And where I speak of it on the podcast recently, I was talking about a priest that I've worked with, and he's from the ways of the Incas and works with a chief from Peru. And we were doing ceremonies, and after the ceremony, I walked up and I gave him a kiss on the cheek, and I said, "You're a beautiful man." Without hesitation, without even thought, just immediately, he says, "You're only seeing a reflection of yourself."
Mm.
It's interesting because I wouldn't know a good-looking man if I saw one, and he is a beautiful man. I mean, you couldn't help but to see it in him. I mean, when you're in his presence, you know what you're in the presence of. That to me is beauty. And that strength is beauty to me. It's like you see a strong woman and it's like you might not recognize it and say, oh, wow, that's a strong woman. You might see it as a beautiful woman. You might see it as, and that attractiveness in people is just really the essence of strength and beauty in my mind.
Mm. You
Yeah.
hear this term man crush. I've heard that, and
Yeah.
if you stand back and look at the people that have been man crushed, I guess, they're often strong. They're
Yeah.
strong men who are leaders and courageous lions that
Right.
other men are, have this may not be so much about their looks. There's something about them that's so attractive
Right.
to other men. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And I've had some elders in my life who have done some really phenomenal things. And it's so easy to see the essence in them because they're so open. One man I know, he started the first interracial meetings, AA meetings in the Twin Cities in 1965. And he got sober before President Kennedy was shot. And he's done all this great work, right? And I asked him one time because I was pretty impressed with myself after an encounter I had. I don't know if you've ever been impressed with yourself, but I was on this given day because it took me so long to recognize something. And I asked him, I said, when you were at a dinner for Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was at dinner in the Twin Cities that I know of twice, in 1965 and 1967 both. And I believe that Joseph was at both of them, but it was one of the two at least. And I asked him, I said, when you were at that dinner for Dr. King, were you the only white boy in the room? This is 50 years after that dinner. Now I get it. He's there with his friends. He was a civil rights attorney. I get what he was doing there in a sense. And I asked him this question, and he said, 50 years after the dinner, he said, I don't know. He still never had a thought about it. And I'm like, if you're the only one of your ethnicity in the room, doesn't it stand out at some point? I was impressed that it took me 45 minutes to notice it at one point. That's why I asked him. And 50 years later, he still didn't know. That's the essence of some people I've been around. Is like they're just so present that things don't matter that shouldn't matter. And I think that so often our minds have taken us to a point where we put things in the way and then we create a situation in our mind and we make things matter that really shouldn't matter. And once we remove that blockage and become more open, then I think we see things different. And Joseph talked a lot about that, seeing it different, and he's the one that I sat down to have breakfast with, and he was using different terminology at the time, and I kind of called him out on it because he'd curse with it, but he'd say, I don't know anything. And it's his way of saying, and I said, but you say that we speak everything into existence. So what are you speaking into existence when you say, I don't know anything? How about I'm here to learn? I said, isn't that better terminology? So I said that to him at breakfast one time. I looked at him, we're having breakfast. I said, I'm here to learn. And he looks at me, he said, I'm here to unlearn. I mean, just the idea, when he said it, I'm like, it just blew my head because I have to unlearn some things to make room for new ideas. It's the old ideas I really need to get out of my head to open up to new ideas. So I mean the idea of, and I still like the term, I'm here to learn. I love that idea. I mean, every moment of every day I can live in that.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you say that idea, I know ideas are different than beliefs, but I think in the context of what you're saying, like I just keep thinking about the subconscious mind because that is where our beliefs are stored and the reason how we end up, showing up on the outside and what comes out of our mouths, the terminology that comes out of our mouths does it highlights some of the things that are going on in the subconscious mind.
Right.
And yeah, we do need to. I need to. I'll speak in I terms. I need
Well,
to unlearn things as well and let things go. And let old belief systems go to
right,
make room for new belief systems that actually serve me and serve the people around me.
right. And I think for me, what I'm realizing is that they, the only way they serve me is just the fact that they serve others. It's like I have a couple of Lakota prayers that I like to say. And one of them is, we chose honey, Wokyo. Good health, good help, and good understanding. Because then if I don't know your mind or I don't know where you're at, I can still say that for you. I can always say that for me. Good health, good health, good understanding. It's an easy prayer and it makes sense and it's simple. Well, one of my spiritual advisors tells me, and these are men that I've sat with in Sweat Lodge for decades. One of them will say, you can't pray for someone else because you don't know their mind. So when you're in Sweat Lodge, you only pray for yourself. And the other one says, well, you never pray for yourself in Sweat Lodge. He said, you always pray for everybody else because they're all praying for you. And to find the balance within that, know that the truth is within both of those rather than one or the other. I think where I got confused when I was coming up and through time is I want to say, well, one is true, then the other one can't be. Why can't they both be true? So, and for me, it's that idea that I've heard people talk about in 12-step programs that's in that book that I referred to earlier is praying for ourselves is good when it's not selfish, and I do an episode talking about the difference between selfishness and self-care. Selfishness has never accomplished me anything. Self-care is really a great thing. Let's use the correct terminology. People will say, well, this is a selfish program or this is and act as if it's good. And it's like, if it's selfish, it's not because nobody else is included in that. Then it's all about self. When it's self-care, then so many people can also benefit from when I do self-care. And so, yeah, I pay a lot of attention to different terminology like that because it really matters to me. You talk about the subconscious and layering things in. It's like why we use a mantra or let's layer it in a good way with light and love, respect, dignity. I mean, for me, that's a and the ideas become beliefs, and then the beliefs I don't need will float on. They will exit because I don't need them because I've created new beliefs through new ideas.
Mm. Can I ask, you've mentioned sweat lodges a few times. Is that a fire in a teepee? Is that a sauna? Like physically, can you describe it? And also, is it men only? Is it women only? Is it mixed? And what is the purpose? Is it like a sauna in that you're detoxing while you're detoxing? Are you detoxing thoughts? Like I have no idea. Can you
So,
just enlighten us?
so it is one of the sacred rites of tribal people. The Buffalo people, the seven council fires of the Buffalo people are the Lakota, Nakota, the Dakota, and then other tribes also do it. And I know more about the ways of the Buffalo people. And sweat lodges are also traditional to Ireland. They call them sweat houses.
Mhm.
Okay. So they've been doing these for thousands, if not millions of years all over the world in different ways. I have been given the blessing by Chief Leonard Crowdog to pour water in the way of the Irish people here on Turtle Island. Okay. And Turtle Island goes from the tips of Alaska through Canada, the United States, Mexico, all the way down to the bottom of South America is Turtle Island. And so a sweat lodge, the way of the Lakota people, is a purification ceremony, and it's one of the sacred rites. So through that process, what we do is depending on your teaching and how you were taught, you heat up a number of grandfathers or rocks, okay? And they're eons. And those eons, those grandfathers, those rocks, I always tell people when you're taking care of the fire, please be gentle with them. Please respect them. These are the bones of Mother Earth, and they're coming in to heal us. So they say we have 28 of them in the fire. We're going to heat them up until they glow orange, and you feel like you can see to the center of them. And then we bring those first seven in to honor the first seven directions. And so we bring them in to what might look like a teepee to someone, but it's more of a rounded hut. Okay. And we have this sacred space called a sweat lodge. It's an inipi. It's a rebirthing process. So we go back into the womb of Mother Earth to be reborn in a purification process. So through this purification process, what we're doing is we're purifying spiritually. Okay. So when we purify spiritually, that means physically, mentally, emotionally, and something more. And I always tell people, you come in to pray. You pray with your mind. You pray with your heart. You pray with all of you. You give these grandfathers everything you don't need, and you receive from them everything you do need. So what's nice is you can tell you're physically detoxing in a sense because you're sweating everything out. It gets maybe hotter than a sauna. I don't know how hot you like a sauna. It
It,
might get warm. Okay. Andea's had a little bit of experience with this, so she could testify to that herself. Sometimes you may feel like it really is getting hot in there because of the mind. Maybe you haven't reconciled something. And maybe something internally doesn't sit right with you and you're a little worked up. And that might be one reason you feel like it's really hot on a given day. So we go through this process of 4 doors. Like I said, we honor the 7 directions. We start where the wind comes from, where our weather comes from, and we go to the west first. That's our first door. So our first direction is the 4 cardinal winds. We start in the west and we go sunwise, clockwise, we go to the north, and each one of them has a color, and there's a reason for them. And then we go to the east and to the south, and then up to Grandfather Sky and down to Mother Earth. And then the seventh and most sacred direction has no color or has all the colors in the world. And that seventh direction is in. And hopefully it's in and not in. We want to go into the heart and not into the mind. We want to go in, or it might be into the anipi, into the center of the circle, into the fire. In could mean many different things. We just want to be conscious that what it means to someone else is their mind, their journey. And so what in means to you might be different. So we go through the process. We do 4 doors. That means that we bring water in 4 different times to pour on these grandfathers and turn them from glowing orange or red into what they need to do for the medicine. So the fire is a masculine energy and the water is a feminine energy. And so when the two of them come together, it's, for lack of a better term, a little magical. It's got that essence of being able to work the medicine at that moment because of the way they come together. So it's a purification process, and it's a purification process for an individual. And I tell people when we come in individual. We come in as an individual. And when we leave as one. We are all one. We become one at that time. So then afterwards we feast. So there's certain rituals within the ritual or the ceremony that we do, and making sure that we nourish our bodies afterwards is a really important part of it. It is part of the whole ceremony, is that we eat something together afterwards. And it does get physically hot in there, and sometimes, like I said, that temperature rises because something in your heart wasn't reconciled or something in your mind wasn't reconciled to going in, and it'll come out. You'll be able to release it. It just might be a little hard on you, and you might feel that through the heat, if that makes a little bit of sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Did I
Wow.
answer your question a little bit?
Yes. Yes. I want to go do one now. We actually attempted one at our cottage on the property, and we had we had pole, like some wood, and then we had some plastic, and it was a really, really cold Thanksgiving weekend. For us is like a month earlier than in the States. I'm up in near north of Ottawa. It's a place
Okay.
called and we all went in it, and we were kind of cold, but it got warmer, and and we had these rocks, and the guy, that our dear friend who spent so much time, he was like, it was his dream to get a sweat lodge at our cottage because we didn't have a sauna or anything,
Right.
and he ended up with pneumonia. So now we all think, like, was there some kind of moss that was on one of those rocks that he was like breathing in over and over?
Well, and part of it is too, where it's really, there's a process to it, and part of it is we don't use plastic tarp. We use
Mm,
blankets, and then we use canvas tarp.
okay.
So it's got a little bit of breathability,
Mhm.
and we want to keep most of it in, and we
Mhm.
can because the plastic won't breathe,
Yeah.
doesn't have the escapability that it might need. And then on top of it, plastic just isn't a
Mhm.
product that I see as very good. It just some
Natural.
right. And so, I mean, the canvas sometimes is, I mean, and originally it probably, it's hard sometimes to find out what happened generations ago because there was at least probably three different generations of missions that came into Turtle Island. And the first generation of missions really just lived with people and they became part of and they married them and they just lived with them. And then the second generation really started to be a detriment to the people that were originally here at that time. And then I think it progressively got worse. Well, through that time, sometimes it's hard, whether it was through boarding schools or other ways, things were taken. And in the United States, I'm not sure when laws changed in Canada. In the United States, it was illegal to do sweat lodges. It was illegal to do any type of ceremony at all. So no Sundance, no Vision Quest, no smudging. You can't even burn sage prior to Jimmy Carter being president.
Wow.
So we had Mondale was vice president, and Mondale's from the state of Minnesota, and I know how he liked to always, up until his death, he worked with the tribes here in some fashion whenever he could. And so I think that he was instrumental in getting the Native American Religious Freedom Act, I believe it was called, something along those lines, passed in about 1978, where it became legal to be able to do these ceremonies. Well, because it was illegal for so long, so in the United States, like I said, I don't know about First Nation in Canada. In the United States, there was people going to fight in World War One off the reservations, going to fight trench warfare, living tribal, going to do this. They're the only ones when they came back that had citizenship. In 1921, nobody had citizenship if they were Native American and they had not fought in World War One, which is really kind of bizarre. What I'm saying is that all the rights were taken. So what they did for a Nipi at the time, a sweat lodge, we think they probably used buffalo hide to cover them.
Mm.
Because what else would the buffalo people use? They use buffalo for everything. I mean, it was, so, I mean, that was their blankets, that was their clothes, that was everything. And so chances are that's the type of thing that they used. People talk about fry bread tacos and things like that. That's not traditional food. That came from the agencies through the government because they had access to flour and lard so they could make fry bread. Traditional food are berries and meat and, rabbits. If you're Irish, you might not partake in rabbits because the Irish hair is sacred. It's a shapeshifter, a shapeshifter. And so the tribal people of Ireland do sweat houses a little differently and they see things differently. And they're a lot the same. There's just certain sacred animals to different tribes of different places. And the island of Ireland, they may do things a little differently. And on the other hand, a lot the same because they were tribal people.
Yeah.
I just feel like you're this. I was telling Andeea about this. This may or may not mean anything to you, but I feel like you're like a modern day Gray Owl. Do you know who Gray Owl is?
A little bit, yeah. I know
Yeah.
of, yeah,
Okay, he's in my mind a Canadian hero who was
right.
Irish. I want to say Irish, I think, but I won't go into big details. But we actually have a family connection to Grail because his wife Andeea was from little town of Mattawa, where my mom grew up.
Wow.
And anyway, but he brought this message about the beavers and how we needed to we couldn't trap all the and keep all the or destroy all the beavers because they were responsible for the streams and the rivers and that kept the ecology of the land and I feel like you look a little bit like Graham. Yeah, Pierce Bronson was the actor in the movie for anybody that wants to go and it's really a wonderful movie and the book is so good. So anyway, I just wow. I just listening to that last bit, I'm like, I have to say something because I feel your message is so relevant, bringing all of this out, this history, and I didn't know some of that, but the things that were illegal over those
And
years, the
it's
lodges,
interesting.
these traditions.
yeah, no Native American could possess or consume alcohol in 1950. It was in the 1950s that it became legal for them to drink. And as one elder of mine tells me about when it came to the reservation at that time, everybody had to have one, and then they don't want it on the reservation because of what it did in the first couple of years. But it's like, and what it did is yes, it affected people. A lot of natives don't have a certain enzyme in their liver to be able to digest it. Nevertheless, it it's bizarre to think back to the 1950s. Yes, it was before I was born, not that much before I was born, and it's like it was illegal for them to consume alcohol. That's bizarre to me. So sometimes when you look at the history of things and how, and not that I think the consumption of alcohol has helped any group of people as a
Mhm.
whole, to be honest with you, I just don't. I see it as a toxin. And so I don't necessarily see it as a good thing. I just find it interesting that, oh, all you people can drink and you people can't. That's just a really bizarre thing to me. So yeah, I like learning a little bit about the history of things because the more I know about the history of things, the more I know of myself.
Mhm.
Whether I'm directly related to that history, whether I'm directly, whatever, it teaches me something about myself, whether it was my grandparents or great grandparents that were there or the grandparents of yours or someone else. It's like it all affects us. Our history will affect us again if we need it to. If we don't do anything, it'll affect us again. If we realize that it doesn't need to, then we do something to not allow it to affect us again. Because it will come back in circles, I think, if we're not paying attention to past history.
Those who don't listen to history are doomed to repeat it. There's some famous
Yes.
quote,
Yes.
Churchill, somebody, but yeah. Oh, goodness.
All right. So thank you so much. This was awesome. Now we are getting to time here, and we do have a signature question that we like to ask. And yeah, you can put a perception on this. What does quantum healthy mean to you?
My perception of quantum healthy. I believe that health, as my wife would say, without health, we have nothing. And so I want to believe that it's bigger than it's ever been. And I want to believe that I don't know as much about it as I will. So it has to do with what I put in my body. That means the things that I listen to. I listen to different music has been such an impact in my life. I listen to different music than I ever did. Some of the old stuff is still good for me. Some of it is not. The food, the intake, the things I put in my mind, the things I absorb, whether it's through my lungs, through my skin, every bit of it is going to affect me. So what is it I'm going to put on my skin? What is it I'm going to put in my mouth? What is it I'm going to put in my ears? And even the things that I see. Because we talk about health. Well, I don't watch the programs I used to watch on TV. I'm more into maybe documentaries or some public TV or some things that are rather fluffy in a sense, and entertainment even looks different. So for me, the idea of quantum healthy is the idea that I'm going to change my mind so that I'm going to intake different things into my body in every aspect of that. And so for me, it's about the things that I'm watching, the conversations I'm having, the things that I'm hearing, the things I'm hearing from myself, the things I'm telling myself, on top of changing the way that I eat, which I've done. I was a vegan for a number of years when I first needed to gift back some weight to the creator because I was a weight I was uncomfortable with. And what I realized is that I became a pescatarian, and now I'm more of a public pescatarian, and I get my eggs from a farmer and I like to buy my meat from a farmer. So if I know who farmed it or who hunted it, I like that meat. Other than that, being a pescatarian and eating fish and seafood is good for me. So the intake of my food, I'm more conscious of because of the journey that I've gone through. And that's a big part of it because of what we put into our system makes us who we are. I think sometimes when people hear that, they think of food. And they're not thinking of what we put in our mind or what we're watching or what we're listening to that we're also putting into our body. And to me, that's a really huge thing is how do I change all of it? And do I realize that I really don't know yet? That I only know a little up to this point. So for me, what it means, I am about to find out. I will find out in the future. And I have a little bit of an idea that I want to continue to change it. If that makes a little bit of sense to what you were asking.
A lot of bit of sense.
Peter, we want to make sure people know how to find you. They're going to be intrigued after this podcast interview. Are you on social media?
I
What
have some things on social media under Catch It, A New Perception, like on Facebook.
okay?
And that is also, it's also a podcast that I have is Catch It, A New Perception, exclusively on YouTube to the point where all of my videos are on YouTube. And I'm looking at getting this last season out on all networks, and I'll probably do those a season at a time when I do that. I say all networks where I can upload it to where it should be on most major outlets.
Like podcast apps like
Through,
Spotify and
yeah, through like podcasts, will be able to put it out on Spotify and Apple and many different formats. Yes.
we were discussing this before you came on that we're like, I hope he brings it out on podcast apps because that would be just like a beautiful way to start your day. Just, and you can be doing the cleaning up the kitchen, or just, but, and having this 15-minute to self-reflect and to hear these beautiful thoughts that you've gained over so many years. So please make sure you
Yeah.
do that for us because you're going to
And
get a
and
lot
I'm
more
looking
listeners.
at it because I like the idea of what happened is I had them a half an hour and I was guided to do them at 15 minutes. And I intentionally wasn't naming them. And then I started to put a title on each episode. And it was very intentional. It's kind of like when I went to video. And the nice thing is being on video, if somebody wants to take the time to watch the video, they can. And if not, they can listen to it. And that's why I want to be able to get it out so that people can just listen to it if they don't want the video itself.
In our little quantum biology space, we tend to download it under Wi-Fi, but for example, and then we would listen to it on our phone that is in airplane mode, no radiation, and you're just
Right.
hearing your voice and in nature. So there's that aspect too. It's a way to hear your material without stealing electrons from our bodies. So
Right. Well, and for me, it's interesting because I do listen to it obviously when I record it, and then I listen to it before I put it out, and I listen to it after it comes out to verify that it came out in
mm,
good shape, right? And so I was telling somebody I listened to these and I'm putting this in my subconscious 3 different times at least. And someone says to me, "Do you like the sound of your own voice?" And I thought, does my voice really bother you? I didn't say that to him, but that was my thought. And I said, it doesn't grate on me. I don't think much of it one way or the other. It doesn't really bother me. And what I like is that certain people, my voice, they tell me it does resonate with them, which I appreciate because it's part of what we're putting in is we want things that resonate with us also.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, so much has resonated today, and it's my honor to thank you, Skeeter. I have several things, so if you can bear with me here. Yeah, things that have come up just listening to you is that you've taught us to pay attention to the terminology that we use and to remove, I think, one important word, which is but, and many of these, what do you call it, the curse language. So thank you for that. And just some concepts that you've introduced us to, like I've never heard about Turtle Island. That's very much a we are one concept, and yeah, really interesting. And just this idea of the purification with the sweat lodges and the grandfathers and the sense of community. Alcohol is a toxin. That's not new to us, but it was very interesting to hear it from your perspective. And then all this, the self-talk, how important that is. thank you for your inspiring recovery, as you termed, from your darkest days,
Right.
and taking that, addiction journey to help so many others. And while I'm at it and Andeea's present, we could say that exactly about her too. So thank you for helping us find and get to know our highest selves. I've heard that in a few podcasts, and I'm really excited to hear more, because that's really important to me personally, to live as my highest self as much as I can. I know there's going to be moments, but if we could all do that on this planet, it would be a different place. So thank you for making, I've heard you say this, making your business loving people
Yes.
and to be of service to people, and all the inclusivity that you brought today to the podcast, this intertribal perspective, it came through. You never said the word, but you really strived to not live with, and act with judgment. A term I haven't heard before, you used in a podcast. Thank you for walking with your heart. And I'd probably say leading with your heart as well, but thank you for sharing your spiritual ways that you have learned, the downloads, as Andeea mentioned them, and leading those with brilliance. And just to end, you said your wish was to change someone's life. I think you've been doing that, and over and over, and may you continue.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned the idea of Turtle Island and how I speak of it. And I was doing a workshop one time, and I was talking about the island of Ireland, and I was talking about Turtle Island, and we are talking about different things, and she said, "You don't speak of country, you speak of land." And I said, "Because land is what's important. And if I speak of country, then you could speak of government. And if you speak of government, you could bring in politics, and that I won't do. It's about the land." And it's interesting because that conversation, doing that workshop that day, it was created in that moment. I hadn't consciously brought that about before. I just realized that is why I do it. So yeah, it is kind of nice. And then the inclusiveness of, all of the Americas as Turtle Island, from Mexico to Canada and North America, and then Central and South America. And I think that inclusiveness needs to be in my life. And the more I speak of it, the more I'll walk towards that, also walk with that.
Beautiful. Would you honor us with ending our podcast the very special way that you end your podcast?
Yes, I often use a terminology, and I will give you this word. It is a Lakota word, is the very last word I use. And it means something close to later again, like see you later. And the way I tell people what Dokshawake means is see you again in this lifetime or the next. Okay. And prior to so that's a word that I don't often describe in my podcast. Live in harmony with and use the bounty of the land to bring kindness to the world.
Thank you for sticking around to the end of this podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, VIVARAYS, who allows for us to get this information to you. They offer top-of-the-line blue blocking glasses, which, as we know, are critical for our health these days for blocking artificial light at night. Over 90% of our time is spent indoors under artificial lights, and this puts us all prone to circadian rhythm disruption. You can use the code QUANTUMHEALTHY for a discount. Link is in the show notes.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.